Hi, everyone. How are you? It is Wendy, and it is a Monday, and I am trying out a new tool. Here's hoping it's working. If it's not, I guess, well, nobody will know. But I am excited because I am trying to kind of expand what I do here, and I'm hoping that it works for you guys. So last week we talked a little bit about the power of permission, and we talked a little bit the it factor. It's my favorite subject. And today I want to start talking to you about why your it factor is so important and why, what a huge factor it plays into this idea of flow. And I just want to see if you guys are coming on, give me a wave or a hi so I'll know if this is working or not. I've got a new software called Be Live, so let's see. It enables me to put up an agenda on here, and it lets me kind of follow along and have a little bit more control of how we can talk to each other. So I don't know. Let's see. So first off, I want to talk a little bit about flow. Now, the whole concept of flow was really coined by I believe he was a Hungarian positive psychologist. His name is Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. So that's a mouthful, but he really coined this idea and this concept of flow and what is important. So for him, really what flow means is that you are fully and completely immersed in an activity. And sometimes people say, oh yeah, I'm in the flow. And you guys know when you're in the flow, you lose track of time. You lose all sense of self, and you kind of just let the world around you disappear. And so it's kind of cool. So first of all, I want to talk a little bit about how you can begin to create flow. So one of the best ways to really set yourself up for success when it comes to flow is to alleviate distractions, right? Be able to sit in a space or work in a space without a phone, without an email, without text messages, without dogs barking maybe, which may be impossible for some. But really, set yourself up to be able to just get in the zone. So, the number one rule about getting in the flow is doing something. It works. Yay. So getting in the flow is really about figuring out a space and a time where you can do something that you know how to do really well. Now, for some people, it is exercise. And for some people, it might be a task that uses your hands, like sewing or knitting or crocheting or things like that. But or it could be something you do in your job. Like maybe you really work a spreadsheet like a champ or whatever, but getting in the flow of a task that doesn't take a whole lot of really hard, challenging skills. So that's one way you can get in the flow. The other way is to do something you love to do, right? So for me, I love to sew, and so sewing and cutting and doing all these things is something that I'm good at, and I love to do, and it takes my mind off everything else in the whole wide world. So I know I talk a lot to business owners about flow in their business, and sometimes it is actually something they do in their business. Maybe it is going on sales calls. Maybe it's making cold calls. I can't imagine being in the flow making cold calls, but I know for a fact there's people out there that are doing it. So I see a couple of you are jumping on. I have got a new tool going on here. And so if you could just say hey or hello, I would really appreciate it, because I don't think there's a way I can see who it is. I just see little bitty heads popping up. So if you just say hi or a wave, that would be great. And then I can see who you are. So one thing the other thing about flow is being able to focus on it as long as possible. So we talked a little bit about distractions and not being distracted. So getting in that space. So creating flow is pretty simple. It is just getting in a task that's not that hard, that you like to do, that's just a little bit challenging. The important thing that is a little bit challenging, because if it's not challenging, it kind of gets monotonous, right? So figuring out what you can do that doesn't take a lot of effort or a lot of mental capacity, but it still is challenging. You can think of in terms of maybe like two people throwing a ball back and forth. That's actually, I've had friends I do this with, and we actually will do it and see how long we can throw it at each other without dropping it. And that, in a way, is kind of a good way of flow. Typically, you want to do something by yourself that's in flow, but not always. So that's kind of a good way to create flow. And the reason it's important to be in the flow, and the reason it needs to be maybe a task that you do well and a task with a little bit of challenge, is that space where you live in flow is actually different than the space where you're learning things. It's different than the space where you are judging yourself. It's different than the space that you are wondering a repetitive, learning, rote learning. So it's a non-prefrontal cortex activity, if that makes sense. So the prefrontal cortex is that place in your brain where you memorize things. It may be a kind of, if you think about it, it's a space where you are probably where you're getting education. So you're learning something new, or it's also a place where we govern ourselves socially. So we don't do things we're not supposed to do in public, or it's kind of our socialized brain. So that's what's important about stepping away from that prefrontal cortex and using some different, more engaging and more interactive, non-judgmental, non-self-governing tasks. So, you might be gardening or something like that. Anyway, so that's one of the best ways to create flow. And I'm kind of speeding through this because I think that you guys get the concept of flow, even if you may not know exactly what it is. So, number 2, I actually made maintaining flow number 2, but in a way, it is really what you do before you start creating flow. So in order to maintain flow, you need to make sure you can stick to that task for a while. You need to make sure you don't have distractions. Being able to maintain flow means you might have to do some due diligence on time blocking or setting a do not disturb mode on your phone or your computer or whatever it is, or blocking it out in your calendar a week in advance, whatever. I personally block a time out every week where I don't have any interruptions, no distractions or anything like that. And speaking of, I just cannot seem to keep my head around a thought today. So the other thing about maintaining flow is you need to make sure it's your peak time. So everybody has this space where there is a time that they work best. And I think we all sort of kind of have an idea of what that is. For me, it's really about that time between about 9:30 and 1:30 is when I can get anything done. I get more work done in those 4 hours than I do the whole day. And it's really important that I set my big Herculean tasks between 9:30 and 1:30. Before 9:30, the coffee hasn't kicked in and I'm not really feeling it. After 1:30, it's kind of patchy depending on if I've had a good night's sleep, or if there's other things I have to work on, or if it's just a matter of that's really when I do my best engagement time. So maybe between 1:30 and 4:30 is when I go out and network and have one-to-ones and or coaching calls, that sort of thing. So past 6:30, totally not going to work for us. I can't, past 6:30, I've been up for 12 hours or more and my brain doesn't work. So you guys, when your peak time is. So in order to maintain your flow, it's really important to do that kind of due diligence on when can I get into that flow? When can I set up that sacred space of time in order to maintain the flow? So one of the things to understand about maintaining flow is, and you know what? We got an agenda here and I forgot. We talked about creating flow, right? So that was what that was about. And I'm learning this new tool, so help me. This is why you can't be in flow while you're learning a new tool. So we talked about creating flow and what the important was and really figuring out what that is. And now we're going to talk a little bit about maintaining flow and the importance of setting time aside in order to maintain the flow. So I don't know about you, but if I'm really in the flow and uninterrupted, I can stay in that flow for like 4 or 5 hours, maybe even 6 hours, depending on what it is. And I look up and the time is gone and I don't even know what's happened. But hey guys, I see a couple of new people come on. I'm on a new tool and I can't for the life of me tell who it is. But I appreciate it, and then I can actually figure out who you are. This is a new tool called Be Live, so we'll see. So anyway, maintaining flow. The other thing that you need to know, it's very, very, very important about maintaining flow, because it is not something that's stagnant. Maintaining flow, it's very important that you quit while you're ahead. So once you start feeling your flow tank get empty, stop. And the reason I'm saying that is because it's kind of like a gas in a car. When it gets to be really, really shallow, if you turn a corner too fast or you do anything, then it skips the juice. You don't get the juice. And so it's really important when you're in flow and you're feeling it start to ebb to stop. And sometimes it may just mean you have to stop and take a break, get a drink of water, take a biology break, whatever. And sometimes it means you just need to quit. One of the things I used to get in the flow, sewing and making clothes, and I knew I was out of flow when I started making mistakes. So that's like kind of a good sign that maybe you are starting to go on the downhill side of your flow. So it's really important you stop, because what happens is when you feel that the ebb of the flow heading down, it becomes force. And when it's force is when you've lost its magic. So really understanding how where that sweet spot is when you have gotten kind of the end of your flow. The other thing is if you wait and you go to that force space instead of stopping, then most of the time you're actually making more work for yourself by either making mistakes or the other thing is you've created this kind of in your head a bad experience based on your flow. So you're less likely to go back to it. So it's really important to stop, because if you stop before you're kaput, then you might even be able to get back into it after a break, depending on what it is. But if you wait till the very end, there's no way you're going to get back into it. So it's important to understand that. The other thing is we talk about expanding flow. Now, let me see if I can do this. See if I can get it to come up. I did it, yay! So expanding flow. One of the things that Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi talks about is flow takes practice. And if you want a new expansion on your flow, then what you do is you add a new skill. But it's really important that you add a new skill to your already existing flow. And the reason is that new skill can then be folded into what the beauty of this flow is. And so when you're making sure that the tools or the skill that you're learning is in congruence with your flow and not acting against it. So this is really kind of where I see a lot of my business clients getting stuck. So what they've done is they kind of know their flow and they've got some really good traction on there. And then they decide that they need to add a new business skill, which is great. Everybody should continue to learn a new business skill, but sometimes they learn a skill that is not congruent with their flow, that is in complete antithesis of what is working. And then they get down on themselves. Then they think they're failures, and then they're looking and comparing to everybody else. I'm not able to do this because everybody else could do it, but I can't, and so therefore I must be a failure, or I need to spend more money on this tool and kind of like force it, trying to make it work. So I see that a lot, and it's not just business owners, it's just people in every walk of life. If it's not working for you, put it down and examine it. If there's pieces of it you can use, great, but if it's not serving you, get rid of it. So I spend a lot of times with my client in this space about what new skill or what new tool do you need to implement. So in order to expand flow, you need to identify a skill that is congruent and fluid with your flow. And that's why understanding what that sweet spot in your flow is and what that it factor in your flow is, because then when you want to add a new tool or a new skill, you can identify immediately whether it's the right tool or not. So that's one thing. The other thing is practice. Take that skill, and when you start folding it into your flow, then it also becomes second nature. It may take a little while, but if you are adding that new skill into something that is already working beautifully, then it kind of will start folding in seamlessly. I hope that makes sense, but that's kind of important. I want to give you guys, and here I am, I'm going to try again. I'm going to try to add a graphic without my face, and let's see. So basically, yes, look at that. Oh, I do have my face. So this is kind of a really good idea about our connection between boredom and flow. And you can kind of see, if you look into the yellow where you have arousal and flow and control, this is kind of what I was talking to you about, like how you begin creating flow is kind of what I would call the arousal stage. So you really are kind of picking at that vision in your mind about what you really, really want to do. And that's kind of like, if you imagine, like, okay, say I'm gardening and I just let the ideas that have been kind of floating around my head flow free. So I might be gardening and my hands are doing one thing, my brain is kind of busy doing mindless work, and all of a sudden this channel opens in your head about this vision. And as you garden and as you're working and picking weeds or digging holes, your brain starts to open up to this idea and this vision. And this vision is kind of that arousal stage. So it's piquing your interest. It's tapping into your creative genius. It's tapping into your curiosity. And that's when you start problem solving. That's when the ideas come. That's when the how-tos might even come, or the expansiveness of how your big vision can play. And that's when you're in this little space of flow now. You're in that flow where it's like all the ideas are coming and all of the doubts and worries that you typically see, like in the blue and the purple, disappear because you can't be in that space at the same time. So you're in this flow and you're doing all these things and you're working and you're potting plants and you're pulling weeds, and then all of a sudden you're tired and you start forgetting things, or you're having to get up and down, and you realize that you might need some sustenance, and that's kind of when you start forcing this stuff. So then you're dipping into that green where the control is, and that control is absolutely 100% your prefrontal cortex. So once your brain is back engaged in that prefrontal cortex, you are no longer in flow. And so that's when it's time to quit. So if that kind of helps you guys understand, what the difference is in the different parts of your brain. So that's a little bit about how you create, maintain, and expand flow. And I think next week we're going to talk seriously about why this is so important, why flow is more important than anything else in your life, and why sometimes taking the time to pull yourself away from your business, to pull away from yourself away from the day-to-day drudgery in order to get into flow is so important. Because the flow space is where the magic happens. The flow space is where you manifest money. The flow space is where you manifest new clients. The flow space is where you create this amazing magnetism to people. And so if you think, I don't have time, I don't have time to work on my business, I only have time to work in my business. See, that's me pretending to be a business owner. The deal is that if that's all you're doing, you might as well quit, because all you're doing is forcing it. So if you look at it, you have pieces of time during your day that you can be in flow. But if you're not putting those pieces of time during the day, then you're going to look back 6 months from now and realize you haven't been in flow in 6 months, and all you've done is force the issue. And guess what? I can almost guarantee you are not having the success you want, and you're leaving things of great value on the table. So that is my Monday. I'm hoping that this Be Live thing works so far. I'm not super happy with it because I can't see you guys and when you're coming up and what you're saying. And so we'll see. We'll see if we can tweak it. But I appreciate you guys sitting here on Monday and watching me talk about these things that I'm so passionate about. And I will see you next week. Bye.